Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's great. It's fantastic. I'm excited for what is shaping up to be a surprisingly interesting Ohio State football game. I think we looked at the Tulsa game on the schedule before the season and went, yeah, I mean, that's just another speed bump between, the interesting games. But all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a bunch of intrigue we can talk about. That's great. Let's do that. Let's talk about the intrigue.
Yeah, I remember you and I talking about the Tulsa game way back when, many months ago, and you were saying well, it's going to be an ugly game because the Ohio State defense is going to be outstanding for the first two games. And I was like, Tom, slow down on that one. We don't know if that's going to be the case. There's a lot of unproven guys here, all new linebackers. Defensive line is due to be a little bit quiet, and we don't know what's going on with those corners. And don't be surprised if there's an injury at safety. And you were all like, no. It's going to be amazing. And now we come back here and we look at where we are, Tom. We can take some stock in that. But as you like to say, we're not here to talk about the past.
The only unfortunate part of that whole conversation was the fact that we hadn't started recording right before you said all those things way back in the summer. I remember it clearly, but we don't have it on record. So unfortunately, we can't enter it in evidence. Sorry.
That's too bad. But I'm sure one of us will say something foolhardy between now and the next time that we want to come back and bust somebody up for something they've said in the past. So, including this show here. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about recap what Ryan Day had to say during his lightning round session with reporters after his radio show. Maybe get into a little bit of what he said during the radio show, though not much was learned there between talking to Day on Tuesday and then listening to the show on Thursday. But the first question that was asked of the during the lightning round, which is the reporters talking today for about 10 minutes, was, hey, who's calling plays on defense? And they said that they'll decide on that today. It seems to me, though, Tom, is Thursday night, because if we're talking, well, maybe it's before practice. So Thursday, is that a little bit do you buy that he's going to tell somebody like, say, Matt Barnes or Al Washington or Larry Johnson, Parker Fleming, like whomever, you're going to tell them Thursday, hey, you're going to be calling plays? Or I'm guessing maybe all during the week, he's like telling Barnes or whomever, like, I'm really thinking about, just keep in mind, like, you may be calling plays. And as they're meeting as a group of coaches and like everybody realizes that it could be me or Barnes knows like it could be him. So he's preparing for it. And then he'll find out on Thursday. Do you think the decision is actually happening today, or is that just what Day is telling us to keep, because this is the last time he's going to talk to us? So it's just easier to say, well, I haven't made up my mind yet.
That very much felt to me like, I'll be ready to discuss this decision later today. Oh, we don't have any more media availabilities before the game. Well, hamburgers. That's too bad. Well, I'll get to talk to you after the game and maybe we'll discuss it then. Yeah, it seems like he's had plenty of time to think about it, plenty of time to consider his options, plenty of time to consider, hey, should the status quo remain or should there be something different? It feels very much like he has decided the status quo cannot and shall not remain. Like that feels like that decision has been made. At one point during the lightning round, he talked about the fact that you can't worry about people's feelings, which is like, could you tell us whose feelings you're thinking of? Because I have a feeling I know whose feelings you're thinking of, but could you just spell that out for us a little more? But yeah, he said you can't think about people's feelings. Like there's just, you don't have to read very far between the lines to go, okay, he's like very, 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 very seriously thinking about making a substantial change at the very least, maybe more. Maybe the decision has already been made and he's not ready to announce it yet, but and maybe he hasn't told the staff yet, but I have a feeling in his head, he knows what he's going to do. And it may be, okay, maybe Thursday afternoon, he's sitting the staff down and saying, here's how we're going to be doing things. That could be the case as well. You don't want to, you don't want to tell the media before you tell the staff. It could be one of those deals as well.
It could be. And he did mention that every situation is different in terms of guys calling plays, because he was asking about Barnes calling plays at times at Maryland, even though he wasn't the defensive coordinator. And he said it's different for every situation. You got to figure out what's best for the team, how you relay the plays, how it gets down to the field, and basically, whoever does it, it just has to be what's best for the defense. The easiest way to get it done, the clearest way, because especially now when you're running against tempo, like there can't be a whole lot of, hold on, just give us 10 more seconds. We'll get this down there. I keep going back to when Ed Warner was the offensive coordinator and would be calling plays, and the quarterback should be like, give us please hurry, let's go, let's speed it up. And when the quarterback is telling the coaches to speed things up, that's not a great sign. And if the entire defense is looking over at the sideline going, hey, come on, let's go speed this up, that's also a bad sign. You saw that in the Oregon game on Garrett Wilson's touchdown, where half of the defense is looking down at their wristbands as the ball is being snapped, and you see Garrett Wilson just running by and putting his hand up almost off of the line of scrimmage because he's already seen that this is going to be a broken play. And not to go back to that game, but of their 28 points, 7 of them came on a broken play. And so that's not a great average. You have something to say about that one, Tom?
Well, I know you always like to bring the audience down. I was going to make a different comparison, which I'm sure the audience will appreciate more, because I think about our audience's feelings, because I'm not the one who says you can't worry about people's feelings, Tony. I worry about the audience's feelings. So instead of a parallel to last week's game, which I'm sure our audience is tired of thinking of, I was going to draw a comparison to last year's Clemson game, where during the Sugar Bowl, Clemson's defense was constantly, Brent Venables is all about matchups and switching, and Ohio State lines up, and then Brent Venables signals in the call, and Ohio State started going fast. And then you had a bunch of Clemson line, players like standing around waiting for a call to come in or looking at the wristbands or whatever it was. And, by the time they were, there was a bunch of plays where they just weren't lined up. And that, when the defense isn't lined up, that works out pretty well for the offense. I mean, go back 2 years to the Fiesta Bowl, another game where they were playing Clemson, and there was the play where Justin Fields was in shotgun and kind of like wandered up to the line of scrimmage and was kind of like acting like he was signaling to people, and Clemson's defensive line all stands up, and then Fields gets under center on like a 4th and 1 or a 3rd and 1 and just drives for it. And the Ohio State offensive line just obliterates the Clemson offensive line because they're not paying attention. They're not squared up. It was pretty, that was a pretty good indication of what that could look like if a opposing defense is not ready at the snap.
Thanks for bringing us down, Tom. How did those 2 seasons end?
Well, the one against Clemson, the Sugar Bowl, I think they won that game. So
how did the seasons end, Tom?
I'm not here to talk about Alabama, Tony. I'm talking about the Clemson game, one of Ohio State fans' most beloved memories.
What about the other Clemson game?
Yeah, but the more recent one was that's old news. We're not here to talk about the past.
We're here to talk about the more recent past, not the less recent past. The getting guys up, lined up. They said that looking at Ohio State's defense against Oregon, it wasn't a matter of getting guys lined up because they were getting lined up, but he did see some hesitancy at times, and as he said, and just not getting the job done. And I think we all saw that as well. So I think it's a concern that everybody was lined up. They were there where they were supposed to be, and then you don't get the job done. And there's some disconnect between why are they hesitant. Keep going back to 2017 and 2018 when talk to Greg Schiano like, hey, do you think things are too complicated? Nah. And then a few weeks later, we've dumped some things down, we've slimmed some things down, made things easier for the players. And I'm going to assume that we'll see some of that as well, some more aggression as well. And just, Ryan Day likes to be aggressive on offense and defense. And we have not seen this defense be aggressive. We've seen it be cautious. And we've seen the results that come from that. I know that I'm going to assume Kerry Combs is worried if you blitz too much or at all, then this defense is already out of whack. Although if it's out of whack, maybe do something about it. And if you're too afraid to blitz, then clearly you've got some issues that are wildly out of control at this point and need to be addressed. So that's a whole other thing. But I do expect to see more blitzing this week, a more aggressive defense, because if you're not creating disruption with the front four, obviously you have to do some other things. And at this point, quote unquote, do some other things. It can't possibly be. They could possibly be worse, but it's not likely to be worse.
There's not a lot of worse on the scale than where they were last week. So that's good news, I guess. You do feel like, I mean, I understand the concern about blitzing, and then you're really leaving yourself vulnerable to big plays. But if you're already giving up big plays repeatedly, like, well, I'm not sure that actually represents a new problem, and it might represent a solution. So maybe it's worth trying something different. And I do expect to see something different. I think you're going to see a lot of different. I think you're going to see a new play caller. I think you're going to see probably a little bit more of an aggressive scheme. And Day talked a little bit about there might be some guys in different spots as well. You may have some guys in new positions as well. So that was the question at the end of last week after the game. He said, we'll have to figure out, is it personnel, is it scheme, is it coaching? And then, he said, he'd let us know on Tuesday, and he didn't really let us know on Tuesday, but I kind of feel like the answer is all of the above, and all of the above are going to get addressed with some new stuff on Saturday.
Yeah. I did like when he said, nobody cares whether you're young or not, can't continue to be an excuse. You can't have patience. You have to have urgency. Guys are getting some valuable experience. There are going to be mistakes, but you can't be losing games while you're doing all of this. And so it can be difficult when you have these young guys. One of the young guys, a couple of young guys, the free safety position, we know Josh Proctor is out for the year. They said that they've got Bryson Shaw and Marcus Hooker there. They're also looking at Ryan Watts as well as Court Williams, and they have to, because this is going to be a long-term fix. I think when you hear those four names, the two latter names are the ones that people will probably want to see more of than Bryson Shaw and Marcus Hooker, because we've seen, like we've talked on the show already, Shaw did not have a great week last week. Graded out a champion the first week, did not have a good week last week. Marcus Hooker, I think people saw enough of last year to have already drawn their conclusions on what they would get this year, whether that's fair or not. But he hasn't been playing much, so that tells me that what is the staff not seeing in practice, that he's not going to be playing. And so, how quickly can Watts be in there? Court Williams had some little injury issues before the season started. Sounds like he's good to go. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that all works out. And I wonder how much time they give Shaw and Hooker.
And, Hooker, you don't want to judge a guy based off of last year, because it's like, well, you had all of spring ball and all of fall camp and all that to get up to speed, except Marcus Hooker didn't, because he was suspended. So he missed pretty much all of spring ball, I think, or all of spring ball. And I think, he was back with the team for the fall, but that's you missed a lot of time this spring, and you were not anywhere close to the top of the depth chart. He was running third from everything we saw, which you're not getting a ton of reps if you're running third during practices and fall camp. And you're definitely not the first couple weeks of the season. So, I don't know how much ground he could have made up over where he was last year with all those limitations. So, maybe he'll come out and really shock everyone and be super impressive. But based on what the coaches, where he is on the depth chart, the coaches don't seem to be real firm believers in him. But based on the fact that they're looking at bringing a couple guys over from other positions, that tells you their level of confidence in the two guys who they have there is not real high right now. So, I mean, I don't think that you're going to have Ryan Watts or Court Williams being like, A1 game ready, All-American level, first time they step on the field this weekend. If they are in that free safety spot, like, that's not realistic for guys who are switching positions, and especially with one of them being banged up. But it seems like if there is going to be a long-term solution that is like, okay, this is a college football playoff level solution at this position, if there is going to be one of those, it's probably one of the guys who's moving positions.
Court Williams dropped some weight from last year. He was listed at 221. We know he got hurt with the ACL. I believe there's an ACL. And then he's dropped some weight down to, 210, 215 in that area. Not outrageous for safety. He's a 4'6" guy. Based on all of the good stuff we've heard about him from coaches, I think we might see some of him Saturday to see what he can do if he's healthy. And again, how much practice has he had? He's been dinged up. It just, you think like he would probably be more capable than Watts at this point, because this is where he's been. He's been at free safety before. He's been bullet, but he's been in the middle of the field in that area. And as we know, Tom, they all learn all the positions. So there is you would assume some familiarity there, certainly more than an outside corner going to free safety. And then when Watts is in, you got to figure the defense is going to be pretty simplistic at that point, because you're not going to ask if he's going to play a free safety this week, or if he's just going to spend some time practicing and getting it down. But if he's out there this week, or even if Court Williams is out there this week, I don't know that that Tulsa would be aware enough to know, like, oh, this is probably going to be something very basic, very simple. How can we attack it, or can we attack those guys? But we do see how they attack Denzel Burke, which so they certainly are aware to that degree. But I don't know in terms of replacements, and now it's Shaw, now it's Hooker, now it's Williams, and how I don't know that they can get that micro organized in terms of when this guy's in, we do this, when this guy's in, they do this, because it's Tulsa. You just got to be able to do what you can do against an Ohio State defense, which is bigger and faster than you. And yeah, they haven't looked good, but I don't think they can get that far into the weeds when playing a game like this.
Well, you also don't have the staff that Ohio State does, where you've got former head coaches as working as analysts. I mean, that I got to tell you, I don't think Tulsa has a former Power 5 head coach as an analyst. I have not gone through their coaching roster, so perhaps I am wrong, but my speculation is that no, they do not have a former Power 5 head coach as a defensive analyst on their staff. If they did, sure, you have the time to run down all that kind of stuff. But it's just a resource issue, just like a lot of other, the rest of the stuff in college football is. One thing that was interesting to me before we move off of this subject is we had talked immediately after the game about, okay, what are they going to do to solve the free safety issue? And we talked about moving Lathan Ransom over from the cover safety spot, maybe moving Marcus Williamson over from the cover safety spot to free safety. Maybe those are possible solutions. It's interesting to me that neither of those guys were ones that they ended up deciding, or at least talking about moving over on Thursday. Does that tell you more that they really like the cover safety spot the way it is, that they don't think that's an issue? Does that mean, Lathan Ransom was my first thought when that happened, because he had been the free safety before, is that we like him so much at the cover safety spot. We think he's the long-term solution there. We just want to leave him there. We think Marcus Williamson is, you have to have depth there, so you're going to leave him there, and you have to try other stuff. You don't want to create a new problem while solving another one.
Yeah, that's a good point. That it's not necessarily robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's unplugging one hole to plug another. And so you'd like to keep Ransom, because I agree. That was just a thought, like, well, okay, you move Ransom back, and then all of these other corners that you have, maybe try them at cover safety where they have to defend like corners. And that's maybe eventually that's where it goes, but it sure seems like, because Ransom, I think he was mentioned like once last week, but hasn't been mentioned since in terms of moving back. And I don't know that it's ever been Day mentioning it. It's just other people throwing names out there and Day saying, yeah, all of that. Basically just a broad sweeping confirmation that, yeah, we're going to do stuff. We're going to try something. Nothing is out of bounds. And I'm sure they have certainly thought about moving Lathan Ransom, but you weigh it, and it comes out like, no, we don't want to do that. And so, I think I feel like that's a good thing, because they at least have one guy they're sure of. Is that crazy?
No, I mean, if you have one spot you're feeling good about, like, okay, that's one less thing you need to worry about. That's which there's plenty of stuff to worry about right now. It feels like the corner positions they're feeling reasonably good about with Cam Brown and Denzel Burke. If you feel reasonably good about Lathan Ransom, like, okay, now you've got 75% of your defensive backfield you're feeling like at least okay about. So then you just have to worry about the one thing. Watts is an interesting guy to move, because I think if you go back a month or so, I remember when we were talking about him during one of the preseason shows, you talked about how he's a corner with safety size. He's what, 6'2", 6'3". I mean, he's someone who you don't ever see corners that size. Those guys always play safety. Mm-hmm. And if he can play corner, like, yeah, that's a huge advantage. But if he has safety size, he's a very logical, answer to be in that. He reminds me in his build a little bit of Josh Proctor. So, he may be more of a natural fit than someone like Marcus Williamson, who's, 5 feet tall. You get that bigger guy, you get the bigger hitter, longer strides, all that kind of stuff that potentially helps you track guys down in the back end. So of all the corners, I think he seems maybe the most logical person to try there. So we'll see how the skills translate. We'll see how quick he can pick up the assignments and all that kind of stuff. But when Day said that, it was kind of like, yeah, it's a logical guy to give a shot there.
Yeah, he says he's 6'3.5". So so he's at least 6'3", or else he would say he's 6'3", which would mean he's 6'2.5". That's how you do these things. You don't round up, you round down on all of these heights. But when you look at him on the field, he is a legitimately tall corner, and he stands out. And you can just look at him with other people, or even by himself, and you're like, that's not a corner. Now, he played pretty well in the first game. Didn't really see much of him in the second game, and maybe we'll see less of him in the third game as he transitions maybe to safety. But as you look at that guy and you're like, yeah, he's probably going to be a safety. But being 6'3", it's always like, well, you've got to give him a shot at corner first, because if he can get a corner, be a 6'3" corner. But I think with the way Cam Brown played last week, with the way Denzel Burke is playing, who knows what's going on with Sevyn Banks? We know he's no longer too injured to play. If those three guys are good to go, and then really Ryan Watts becomes the odd man out, and he can help you more elsewhere, especially when you're still very high on J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock. Legend Cavazos played quite a bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like they've got enough guys at corner. That's why you recruit all of these corners, because they're not all staying at corner. Some are going to go to cover safety. Some are going to go to free safety. That's how it goes. That Jordan Fuller came to Ohio State and started out at corner for about a practice. Then he was moved to safety. Christian Bryant, same thing for a couple of practices before he was moved to corner. CJ Barnett, going way back with Christian Bryant and CJ Barnett, like CJ Barnett was a 4-star corner, and you bring these guys in, and then you move them back. It's a little bit like you bring in a safety, and if he's not quite safety speed, well, let's move him to linebacker, and now you've got a fast linebacker, and that's just how things go. And with you've got to do something, as they said, because you need your long-term fix. You've got at least 10 more games this season, maybe more. We'll see. And you can't be getting the safety play that you've got in this season, at least a free safety play that you got yesterday. And clearly the fear is that if there's an outlier between the first game and the second game for Bryson Shaw, or even if there isn't, if that's the average of the two games, it's not good enough.
No, he was, I think with time he could be fine, but the goals that this team has are not win 10 games or go maybe get to a New Year's 6 game. Like, the goals for this team are win the Big Ten, win the Big Ten, go to the college football playoffs, win the national championship. And that would be asking for an enormous leap out of Bryson Shaw to be at that level of safety, because that is a position that's pretty unforgiving. You can make one mistake as a defensive lineman and it turns into a 10-yard gain. One mistake as a free safety turns into a 77-yard touchdown. That is the nature of the position. It is cruel. It is unforgiving, but that coming in, and I think that's why they are putting so much effort and throwing so many resources into trying to solve that issue right now. Because they know they cannot, you can't have C- safety play, or C safety play, or whatever you want to grade it as. You cannot have, sub 3.0 GPA safety play. That you can't have that and get to where they want to get. So I thought it was interesting. He talked about the defense having good energy this week, which, you would expect that. You would expect there's probably a lot of anger there. As Day said, got to come back today, have another good practice, but you're not really going to know till Saturday. But there was an interesting sentence he said. You put it in your practice or in your report on it. The Day's exact quote was, "A little bit of friction is good." Now, that struck me as something Urban Meyer would say. Like, that seems very much like an Urban Meyer viewpoint on, Urban's thing was always, you got to keep everyone a little bit uncomfortable. So, is this, what did you make of that statement?
Well, and he was talking about the practice this week, and some coaches like it when it's a little chippy or whatever, but just friction guys they're energized. they're unhappy with what happened. They're a little bit, just maybe angry, and with the friction, it's a little uncomfortable. You mentioned uncomfortable. I go back to Raekwon McMillan. I think maybe his freshman or sophomore year when he was playing, and Luke Fickell was there, and you couldn't say the words like comfortable. Like you can't say you're comfortable, or else Luke Fickell would hear it or Urban Meyer would hear it, and it's like you can't get comfortable here, or else you'll get passed by. And McMillan said he's feeling pretty comfortable, and then he like immediately looked around. And is like, not comfortable. I'm just feeling, he just had to backtrack. And yeah, this is there's no reason for this defense, anybody on it, to be comfortable right now. There should be friction from just the defense itself, let alone going up against the Ohio State offense. And it is good. It does let you know that the guys care. It does let you know that they're not just going to accept this, or that this is, you win some, you lose some. That's certainly not what the feeling was at practice.
You win some, you lose some is not a statement that is generally very true around the Ohio State program, and generally not one that would get very well received around the Ohio State program. You go back again to Urban, like after the 31-0 Clemson game, like, this cannot happen. This will not happen again, kind of thing. Like, that's just Ryan Day said, you can't, that this is not acceptable. Kerry Combs said, like, this is not acceptable. I didn't come to Ohio State to lose, was what Kerry Combs said after the game. And so, yeah, that of anything, I think that should give you the most confidence that something substantial is going to change on several different fronts on Saturday, because they know, not only is losing not acceptable and is a great way to end up calling a moving company at the end of the year if you're an assistant coach, but also, the margin for error right now is very slim. So now you don't get your one banana peel game. Like, it is a college football team. It is made up of 18 to 23-year-old young men who are not always the world's most consistent performers. And you have used your mulligan on the second tee. So, okay, now you got to hit them all straight. So good luck.
Yeah. Just imagine if Day would have come out after the Oregon game and said, that was a tough one. Can't have too many more losses like that this season. Like, no, you sure can't. Different expectations, and of course, the goal is to live up to them. I watched Tulsa and Oklahoma State, or at least I had it on while I was doing other work, and then also watching a bit. Tulsa, the defense runs a 3-3-5, so they do some funky things. They have had 9 tackles for loss in each of their first 2 games. The first one being a loss to UC Davis when they were missing about 7 starters due to, I believe, suspension. That was a 19-17 loss. Then they lost at Oklahoma State 28-23, where they were leading for much of the game and basically gave that game away. So this isn't a bad team coming into Columbus, and they will create some issues. They've got some decent running backs. One of their running backs could end up, rushes for like 1,200 yards this year, could end up being the school's all-time leading rusher. Their left tackle was a freshman All-American last year. So they've got some guys. They've got 3 guys with 1,000 yards receiving in their career, another guy with like almost 900. The quarterback, some good, some bad. But it's certainly not a team that Ohio State is going to take lightly. Not that they can take anybody lightly right now. They've played for a conference championship last year, I believe, in the AAC against Cincinnati. So all of this will be fed to the Ohio State football team this week. And while they are getting back to fundamentals and they are getting back to doing what they do and establishing the run and stopping the run, they'll be doing it, Tom, against a team that isn't just going to be some pushover.
I think if you gave them truth serum and said, would you rather have Tulsa first and Akron second, they'd probably rather have Akron first, because Akron is going to be a pushover in a week, but you get Tulsa. So you play Tulsa. Tulsa's not going to be a pushover. Tulsa's also a team that, it would take an absolute unmitigated disaster on both sides of the ball for Ohio State to lose to Tulsa. So this is why you play these games. And there's a reason a lot of these teams try to play these games weeks 1 and 2 and not get kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool like Ohio State did this year. But, you have an opportunity now to sort of, really field test this new, whatever you're trying to do this week, you're going to kind of field test it. And can Matt, let's say it's Matt Barnes. Can Matt Barnes call plays against an opponent who has personnel that is not going to match up with Ohio State, but which is like from the same planet as Ohio State. Next week against Akron is going to be, I mean, the Florida A&M team that came in was pretty darn bad in 2013 or so. The Akron team that's coming in next week is going to be right down there, but that one probably not that bad, but pretty darn bad. This will give you at least a decent sense for, okay, can this guy do it with a little bit of stress on him? Can the safeties hold up against receivers who are at least, like, oh, this is like a Division I wide receiver. Okay. Tulsa's like a, finish fifth in the Big Ten West kind of team. That's probably about where they are. So, this is not a stiff challenge that Ohio State is going to face, but this is a team that's like, okay, this is not a team that's like, yeah, Vanderbilt would beat this team by 40 points. Like that's not what you want. You want, this is at least a decent challenge for them. See where you are after this game, learn from it, and then you get a week to just pave Akron and get your stuff straightened out. And like, that's not a bad time to let Ryan Watts, you want to make some mistakes, go ahead and make some mistakes against Akron when it's going to be 62-0 in the third quarter. And you take a bad angle, that's fine. We'll learn from it and move on. This is not, that's not this week necessarily. That may be next week, but this week, you're at least, I think you're going to learn something about the Ohio State defense this week, just because it is a competent enough opponent that you're going to, there will be a little bit of stress put on it.
I think a good performance means something. A bad performance means more, obviously. Just like after the Minnesota game, saying that the defense we'll see against Oregon will be a much more representative defense of what the Buckeyes are going to do. That doesn't mean it's going to be good. And in fact, if it's bad, then things are bad. There's trouble there. So it's similar this week, except I think if they play well and they, 10 points, give up 10 points or whatever, that's a good performance. And it should be judged as such, even though it won't truly matter until they do it in the Big Ten. But a good performance defensively will still mean something and should be treated as such, and don't just dismiss it. A bad performance, however, means even more.
Yeah, I mean, there's not, I don't think there's anything you could see this weekend that would tell you this defense is definitively fixed. I think there's a bunch of different stuff you could see this weekend that's nope, they need to keep working. This ain't it, Chief, as the kids say. You're going to give up points. You're not shutting this team out. But as you said, you give up 10 points, 9 points where I maybe get hit my bold prediction from yesterday's show would be great. I would prefer 9 points to 10 points if it comes down to that. But, even if it's under 20, like that would be like, okay, if this game is like 49-31, like there's still major problems. And then you start going, okay, well, now the trip to Rutgers looks a little dicey in a couple weeks. I mean, the next 4 games are all games they should win relatively comfortably. But if the defense is, if you have one side of the ball that cannot get off the field, I mean, think back to all the Mike Leach Texas Tech teams, or Mike Leach Washington State teams, or pretty much any Big 12 game for the last 20 years or so. Like, you can score a bunch of points, but if you're giving up a bunch of points too, well, the game is still in doubt. That's, Ole Miss has learned that lesson a few times over the years. Oklahoma has learned that lesson a few times over the years. There aren't that many Ohio State teams that have had seasons like that, but I'm sure thinking back can remember some. And those are not always seasons that are great for a fan's blood pressure. But at least they're entertaining games. No one complains that they're bored at the games.
Way to bring us down again, Tom, and right at the end of the show, just as you are wont to do. So I think that will do it, unless you have anything else depressing that you want to add to the show, Tom.
Well, typically for the second week in a row, I will remind you that when we do a preview show, we typically share a score prediction.
I have not thought for more than 2 seconds about what my score prediction is going to be. So
I very responsibly sent mine to Mark about 24 hours ago. So
okay. Well, let me think what I'm going to say as my score prediction. Okay, I'm good. If you want to give yours.
No, you go ahead and give yours first. Go ahead.
I am going to say Ohio State. I was going to say 45-17, but now I'm going to kick that up a notch and go 52-17.
Okay, well, I guess that's good because my score prediction that I've already sent in is 42-17, which how are we always like 3 points off? I don't understand how this is possible. But yeah, 17 points seems about right. And this is a decent team. I go back and I'll give you a little slice of my thinking here. I go back to some of the recent mid-season Ohio State losses, where 2018 they lost to Purdue and then had a really gross win against Nebraska. They had a bye week and then a really terrible win against Nebraska the week after that. But you go back to 2017 and they lost twice that season. They lost to Oklahoma in week 2, and then they played Army in week 3. Army was a 10-win team, and Ohio State beat them 38-7. And it was like one of those not as close as the score indicated kind of games. And then they lost to Iowa, and then they came back the next week and played another 10-win team, Michigan State, and they just fed Michigan State into a wood chipper. That was 48-3, and another one where it was like that game was over 5 minutes into the game, and I remember sitting in the press box looking at you like, what is going on? Like, what? Woody Hayes has the old saying, nothing cleanses the soul like getting the hell kicked out of you. I mean, they didn't get the hell kicked out of them last week. At least the offense didn't. But a loss has a way of focusing you. And, you Garrett Wilson talked about the fact that practice has been a little bit more focused this week. Ryan Day talked about, sort of spirited practices this week. There's so much talent on this Ohio State defense and this Ohio State team overall that if they're focused, like that's the problem Michigan runs into every year is Ohio State never overlooks Michigan. So then if we're Ohio State always clobbers Michigan because Ohio State has better talent than the Michigan. It seems to me like that could be what happens on Saturday. And, what'll be interesting to me is if Tulsa does get to 17, is that it's 45-3 after 3 quarters, and then they score a couple touchdowns against the backups, or is it 28-17 at halftime, and then Ohio State, puts it away after the half? That'll be intriguing to me as well.
Yeah, they're different 17s, and yet 17 points in the first quarter, and then they shut them down for the rest of the game is also okay. But if it's like a touchdown drive in the first quarter, a touchdown drive in the second quarter, and then they stop them at the 5 in the third quarter, and it's a field goal, it's like, well, is that like 3 sustained drives? Is that,
Let me tell you, I think the worst case scenario of all the ones you've laid out is 17 points in the first quarter, because at that point, the entire stadium's on fire in the middle of the second quarter, and I'm not sure they get to finish the game. So that I don't think, what
if there's a couple of pick sixes?
Yeah, I don't think Tulsa is on pace for 68 points after a quarter is going to go over real well in the stadium on Saturday. So, that's probably not a winning scenario for Ohio State.
I am disappointed that your score prediction does not match your bold prediction of 9 points or fewer for the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Well, these are separate cinematic universes. So this is from the score prediction is from the front page. That's just totally separate from the podcast. So it doesn't have to be canon.
I thought you were going to say these are uncertain times, and yes, yes, they are. At least
we've talked about the wisdom of hedging bets before.
Yes. At least my score prediction has at least the 5 touchdowns I need from CJ Stroud. So if you guys don't know what we're talking about our bold predictions show from yesterday. Go ahead and check that out, where Tom and I each give 5 basic bold predictions. And then at the end, we decide, hey, let's throw out a money ball. Let's go with the 2-pointer, which is a little bit bolder. We're actually quite a bit bolder. And then if we get that, then boy, maybe we should even make that a 3-pointer or 4-pointer. Who knows? But that will do it for this preview show of the Tulsa Ohio State game / update on what Ryan Day had to say, tied it all together. I thought it made for a very cohesive show. Good job by us. If there's anything else you guys are interested in finding out about Ohio State, check out BuckeyeScoop.com. Always feel free to hit us up on Twitter. Tom is at TomOr4. I am at Tony Gerdeman. We're there. We'll talk. You can also become a member, and we're on the Ask Insiders message board. We'll talk to you there as well. You can also find all of our stuff at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop. Shows like this one, Tom's Morning Scoop, and many, many more. So thank you all for listening and watching, and we will talk to you guys later.